Hello, this is Demon Phoenix with a video for Dead Space veterans. There has been a fair amount of discussion recently about how to do Dead Space 2 hardcore, and one of the things people keep suggesting is to use the plasma cutter and the pulse rifle together. This is ridiculous and it wastes a lot of time and resources. So here you can see the first 3 chapters are pretty much exactly the same because you have to use the plasma cutter until you get the pulse rifle after the train segment anyway. So upgrading the pulse rifle at the first bench after you get it at the store, you'll be able to upgrade about 7 nodes there and get a few damage. And at the bottom right you can see the plasma cutter, the equivalent. You can get about 8 nodes in there and get the damage upgrades and 1 or 2 of the speed as well. So you're better putting the nodes into just one of the guns than splitting the resources between them. And my point is that there is nothing that you can't do with one of the guns that you can't do with the other, so there's no point having them both. You might as well have a power weapon. That was a regular necro that go down easy once you've upgraded the power, so instead of having a weak pulse rifle or a weak plasma cutter, you might as well have a strong one of just one of them, and you can see it took it out no problem. When you get to the Church of Unitology, you'll have a couple more nodes, especially if you're selling things here, and you should be able to do the early game if you're doing hardcore or Zella anyway. You need to be that good at it to be able to try it. So you upgrade and get the rest of the damage upgrades there for the pulse rifle and a couple of the extra capacity, moving towards the special for the plasma cutter. When you're taking out the stalkers like this is the first time you fight them, but you can see that again you don't have to switch weapons. There's no need to have one if you've got the other. You can just do it here. So with the speed upgrades of the plasma cutter, you can take them out no problem, as you can see in the bottom right. And at the top left, the pulse rifle's even better for them. Neither of the guns knock them back, so you're actually probably better having a power weapon to deal with these, something like the Ripper, and you've always got stasis, so again either of them is really good. With the plasma cutter you want those speed upgrades by this point, or at least one of them, so that you can very quickly shoot at the feet. But again, if you've not got 2 guns and you're not splitting the nodes between them, you'll have more upgrades in your stasis available anyway. So you can stasis one, you can have extra energy charges to be able to shoot them with the stasis and slow them down if they get out of hand or anything like that. And you can see that with the pulse rifle, having prioritised its upgrades instead of being a weak weapon, it's fairly strong for like a standard one, at least until the black necros turn up. So after you've done the stalkers, one of the other things that you can look at, the different types of enemies, is the things that the pregnant spawns, the little crawlers. Now the pulse rifle is significantly better than this but for doing this, so if you've got the pulse rifle you'll have no problems at all. But with the plasma cutter, if you aren't splitting the ammo between them, most of your pickups will be plasma cutter. So you can you'll have more ammo anyway, and you can use things like bodies to sort of throw them at the crawlers and all that kind of thing. And you'll have more upgrades in the plasma cutter, so you'll have higher capacity anyway. So again, it's better to have just one of the guns than it is to having both. There's no point. If you're going to have the pulse rifle, use the pulse rifle and upgrade it. If you're going to use the plasma cutter, just upgrade the plasma cutter and use that instead. Put the upgrades into capacity and special. So as you can see, it takes a little bit longer with the plasma cutter for this bit, but you can save energy by throwing the bodies and things like that as well. The other thing that you have to remember is you're not just saying why you're having one of the weapons and not the other. If you're having both, you are splitting the upgrades between them, and you might as well put that into a power weapon. You'd be much better off having one of the guns and then something like the Ripper or the flamethrower or whatever other close range weapon you want, or a medium range weapon like the Javelin. So as you can see there, the lurkers pose no problems for either of them. The plasma cutter's good at hitting the tentacles when the tentacles come out, and the pulse rifle just does a lot of damage per second, so it just takes them out without having to wait for the tentacles or anything like that. The tripod, you're best off just switching back to the center aim regardless of which weapon you're using. It's very difficult to hit with classic aim with any of the guns. As you can see there, it goes a bit funny with the pulse rifle, so I have to switch it to the center aim to be able to hit it easier, and that's exactly the same as with the classic aim with the plasma cutter. So I switch it there just to do this bit. You'll see that in a lot of guides and walkthroughs that are exactly the same. The plasma cutter graphics are a little bit weird when you're shooting the tormentor here, the tripod here, so you will still be hitting it as long as your crosshair is aiming at it properly. For the pack, the pulse rifle obviously is a brilliant weapon for it. But again, if you've got the pulse rifle, you have no need for the plasma cutter when you're fighting the pack. You can just use the pulse rifle, and obviously again you'd have more ammo for it if it's your only weapon, or you'd be able to put it with a more interesting or powerful weapon. The Ripper makes absolute mincemeat of the pack as well, so there's no need to have the pulse rifle if you could have the Ripper instead whilst fighting these. And because in this example I'm just using the pulse rifle, I've already put so much upgrades into it that it has the special, and so before the corpses even disappear for the pack, they drop their and they drop the loot and everything, so you'll be able to get the money and drops from that as well. So again, you lose absolutely nothing by not having the pulse rifle if you're doing it with the plasma cutter. And again, you'd be better off just having the Ripper or something else. At this point, the Ripper would probably, I think, be the only one available apart from maybe the Javelin Gun, and you'd not have upgraded the Javelin Gun to the point that you need it necessary to be able to use it regularly at this point, because the Javelin Gun needs more upgrades to be effective. But anyway, exactly the same again, no problems with just one of the guns and no need to have both. Now we've got Pregnants and Leapers. So Pregnants, you always want to be taking them out using just the limbs anyway, so you want to be taking out the legs if you can, and then when you've took out one of the legs, you can take out the arms, and it's easier to hit the arms when the legs already been took out. As you can see on the top left with the pulse rifle there, I actually caught the belly of the Pregnant, which is easier to do with the pulse rifle, but it doesn't matter anyway, because you can just use the secondary fire grenade to take out the whole crawlers once they spawn anyway. Leapers are difficult with either of them, but if you're putting your nodes into just one of the weapons, you can put more nodes into your stasis, or again you can have another weapon that deals with the Leapers a lot better, like the Ripper, which is absolutely amazing for them. If you watch my hardcore walkthrough, you can see how you can hide around corners with the Ripper and they just run into it and die anyway. But if you were determined to use one of these weaker weapons to try and do it, you can still do it because you'd have more stasis, because instead of splitting the nodes between two guns, you'd have put them into stasis and you can have more stasis energy shots, and that's really necessary with Leapers anyway, because they're absolute pain in the backside enemies and they're very difficult with the weaker weapons. Again, that's a reason why you want to be having one weak weapon for your standard enemies, and then for things that are a little more troublesome, something better like the Ripper or the Force Gun or something like that, and later on the Contact Beam. So after you've done these upgrades in Chapter 6, we're at the exact same point with both guns, and you see that because we've got the extra nodes available from only upgrading one of the weapons, you can put them into the stasis if you want, and we get a duration, both of the recharge and all of the energy upgrades, as well as having, you know, sort of maxed the one gun that we are using. The Brute is exactly the same with both. Again, I'd recommend a power weapon, that's why you have power weapons, and they complement your standard weapon like the pulse rifle or the plasma cutter. But here, even if you are taking out the Brute, it's very easy, you just stasis them. Again, you'd have more stasis available. Catch the pods when it shoots it after you've destroyed one of the arms, or you can do the same thing by running behind it and destroying one of the legs, which is even easier to take out than the arms, and they go down fairly quickly after that. So again, even though the Brutes are quite powerful, I would normally recommend doing it with a different weapon like the Ripper or something else, the Flamethrower if it's upgraded, any of those. But if you're using your standard weapon, they function exactly the same, no need to have the pulse rifle with the plasma cutter or vice versa. Now the Guardians are a bit more of a problem for the plasma cutter, but again, you can just use stasis and then take out all the arms. The pulse rifle, it's really easy, that's one of the things where an unupgraded secondary fire grenade just takes them out, no problem. Now both of these weapons are actually pretty decent if you don't have for the tripod elevator. If you don't have DLC weapons, then you won't have the Force Gun because you get the schematic after this. The Force Gun's actually probably the best for this, but if you're not using DLC, like I didn't on my first hardcore run, then you'd be better just using one of these weapons anyway. And there's absolutely no problems with doing that. So one of the things that you can do is just stand in the middle, put your sensitivity up a little bit. I found it more comfortable on 6, although I have sometimes done it with 10 before. Stand in the middle, and because you've upgraded the weapons to their max, they'll have good reload capacity now, so as soon as you finish shooting and you get a bit of a break, you can just very quickly reload, and they're both very effective for taking out the tripods. So that's another thing where it's a bonus for having one of the weapons fully upgraded instead of splitting the resources between two of them and having both. There's no need, they both do the job absolutely fine, whichever one you decide to go for. At this point, if you're watching my hardcore walkthrough at all, I recommend that you would actually respec out the nodes from the weaker weapon, because black necros become the common enemies through the end of the game, and you can start having a better weapon set by taking the nodes out of the pulse rifle or the plasma cutter. Especially the plasma cutter is just not as useful later in the game, and put it into something like the Javelin Gun. But you don't have to, the plasma cutter still does well, but again, it's better as a complementary weapon, and you don't need two complementary weapons, you're better off with just one of them. So after you've done the tripod sequence, and you speak to, well, not speak to, but you throw around the corpse of Watchman Howard Phillips. you start getting more black necros as the standard enemies, and you can see here, you go for the limbs like you do with any of the Dead Space games, and it's absolutely fine with either of the weapons. Again, the weapons don't have the stopping power for the black necros, and it does take a couple of shots, so you are better off with a power weapon. Now this is one of the examples later in the game as you start to get to this sort of level of why you don't want to have both of these weapons, because neither of them are good for this kind of situation. So here you have a couple of black necros and a couple of regular necros, and they're coming at you from multiple sides, and you can see it's quite difficult because even though you can take them down reasonably quickly, you have to be using your stasis to buy time. You'd be much better with the force gun or the ripper, and in a moment we're going to get the contact beam, and then because you can upgrade the contact beam more, it's a fantastic weapon, and that deals damage and destroys enemies. So again, close range, you're better with one of the power weapons as a complement to your main weapon. So this is the point where we've got the vintage suit, we've gone on a little bit further, and we're ready to start upgrading the contact beam because we've got it with the schematic. And you can see that because we're not splitting nodes, being able to fully upgrade the secondary fire straight away, and because I'm quite conservative with nodes and what I'm able to spend, and I didn't have to spend a lot on health packs or ammo or anything like that, I've just used what I picked up. I've been able to get enough nodes to get right down to the charge and already have the charge for the contact beam. Both scenarios ended up pretty much exactly the same. I was 4 minutes faster with the plasma cutter, and that's just random variance, and I had one node more on the pulse rifle, and again, that's just random variance from what I picked up. So, do not advise people to get both. There is no